These easels are absolute beasts. They really are hard to... Great. The thing that led to this recent campaign of treatment was the fact that the panel had a small split in the back that had never been properly repaired. There'd been some retouching on the loss, but without really dealing with the structural problem itself. My colleague Lynn Harrison did a careful repair of the panel. I'm just going to spin it round so you can see that this small split on a panel which otherwise is in very good condition, it's got its original thickness, had actually come and sprung apart, and so Lynn inserted a small thin slip of poplar of similar density to that used by the painter into the loss, because we can't spring it together where the wood is actually sprung. We can't pull it together to fill it with a little bit of poplar and work on the level of the split, that is to say, getting this as close together as we can in terms of not having any kind of step between the two sections of the panel, and then bringing it all back together to allow me to do a shallow fill on top of her repair, onto which I will do my retouching. Hi, I'm Larry Keith. I'm head of conservation and keeper, and I'd like to talk to you today about the treatment of this weird and wonderful work by an artist called Piero di Cosimo. It's a nymph and shepherd. It's a painting from the mid-1490s, one of two that we have in our collection, and very typical of him. He's an artist who Vasari described as being very, very eccentric, and whether or not, however accurate that may be, he certainly is masterful, I think, at making these kind of poetic, dreamlike landscapes, and with these stories that are a little bit fantastical. There's whole things about him being a pyrophobic. He was afraid of fire, and so he didn't like cooking, according to Vasari. Vasari, of course, is famous for embroidering anecdotes, and it's impossible to know just how accurate they are, but he talks about Piero di Cosimo being someone who liked to boil 50 eggs at a time, so he would have his meals ready to go for a long time without having to cook very often. Things like that. We don't know how accurate that is, but the received tradition of him being a slightly eccentric person, I think, sits comfortably with our appreciation of the fantasy element we see in his works. We're not entirely sure exactly what the subject is, other than obviously it's a nymph, a dying nymph mourned over by a satyr, and typical kind of animals, flora and fauna, that Piero di Cosimo was particularly fascinated with and very adept at, whether it's the beautifully observed vegetation, pelicans, other animals. And the treatment now is at the stage where the cleaning's finished, and I've just started the retouching very recently. This is the image in under ultraviolet light. All of our retouchings will show because of the different layer structure and where they sit above the varnish, and they typically absorb the light and show dark. So these dark spots are modern retouchings, carefully applied just over the damages. The painting's in very good condition in general, and a lot of the tiny losses you see across the surface are interesting because they seem to be related to Piero di Cosimo's painting technique itself. If we come a little closer, look a little bit, you can see the first drawing that he did, very bold sketching, underdrawing, which you can see showing through the painting in many, many areas because of the naturally increasing transparency of the oil paint medium he used. And it seems also that in many cases, whatever the medium of this underdrawing is, the paint itself, Piero's paint, hasn't stuck very well to it. If you look closely, you can see areas where the paint over the underdrawing has developed its own rather pronounced craquelure, slightly raised, and in other parts it's simply flaked off. Here, where these dogs' legs had been extended and then changed to depict the dog kneeling, you can see the first drawn legs below, and the paint of the overlying landscape has pinged off exactly where the ink is. And we see that time and time again here along the contour of her leg, other areas as well. And so really, this is the kind of picture where we're trying to just take out the kind of snowstorm of tiny white losses. And in so doing, I think, the volumes and relationships that are always there will be revealed as the work progresses. And it'll be a very satisfying thing to do because it's such a wonderful, attractive image. There's another very interesting, not unique to him, but certainly very remarkable element about this. If you look closely in the sky, you can see it's got hundreds of fingerprints where he's actually put the very expensive and carefully measured out blue pigment, the glaze across the top, and as he feathers it down, he's touched it in with his fingers and dabbed along, and you can see the fingerprints all across the transition from the darker blue to the lighter blue sky. And there's something about that I think is very, very compelling, because it just feels, you know, literally like the touch of the artist is right there with us as we look at the picture. Something very satisfying to see. If you'd like to learn more about the collection, you can click here or here. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.